It seems to me that the criticism of R2P that it rests everything in the Security Council, and if the Security Council can't act, then there's no R2P, is much too narrow a conception of it. First of all, there's a possibility that if there is a blockage in the Security Council, that it can still refer issues to the General Assembly, and that is a procedural matter for the Council, and therefore it cannot be vetoed. And that's happened on a number of occasions in the past, and it could happen in the future in terms, let's say, of a preventive deployment of peacekeepers. The first big peacekeeping mission, UNF-1 in the Sinai in 1956, actually was authorized by the General Assembly, not the Security Council. So that certainly is possible. In addition, there's possibility of action by the General Assembly to conduct an investigation, to agree to the Secretary General sending mediators to an area, to send some monitors of their own from the Assembly. So there's lots of things that could be done there, lots of things with the Peace Building Commission and post-conflict situations. And with the Security Council, we shouldn't think that the only thing that matters is a Chapter 7 coercive military action authorized by the Security Council. Because the Security Council itself can do an investigation. It doesn't have to have a extant threat to international peace and security. It can just be because they think there's a dispute under Article 34 of the Charter that needs to be addressed and understood better. So I think there's a much broader range of ways of going about it. And yes, the veto can be a problem in the Security Council, but ultimately R2P is a political concept, and it's trying to convince people that in fact near the top of the priority board should be stopping mass atrocity crimes. And therefore it tends to try to reach publics, the media, parliamentarians, and then through them and through interest in this to affect governments and affect their choices. So we're worried obviously about potential vetoes in these kinds of situations and the Council being selective. But on the other hand, the Council tends to respond, because it's made of individual governments, to public pressures. And so if R2P has a public movement, if it has the interest of parliamentarians, as legislation or hearings and other things, that then puts the governments that might think about casting a veto maybe to think twice, that it raises the political cost to them of casting a veto. It raises the political costs of looking the other way when one of these atrocities breaks out. So we're really trying to affect political priorities more than anything else. And we hope over time that affect the Council itself, and the way it acts, and the way it decides, and the way the members interact on these kinds of issues. If you actually look at the Council's record, for example, on protection of civilians in armed conflict, just one specific case like the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, or Darfur, or other places where in fact there's a lot of violence against civilians. The Council doesn't have, miracle cures for these kinds of situations, but it's paying much, much more attention to them than it used to in the past. I mean, who would have thought that now almost every significant Security Council resolution with a new peacekeeping mission has some kind of a humanitarian piece, a protection piece, looking at security not just through a national lens, but through the lens of human security. And R2P is an important part of that. And so we think that actually the prospects are relatively good over time, that the Council will more and more take into account the responsibility to protect people and not just to protect states and their borders. So we think the trend lines are in the right direction, but we don't assume that we'll always see things go the way they ought to, that the Council members will always be responsible the way they should be. And so we think there are alternatives, whether it's the Secretary General conducting investigations, doing public diplomacy, or very quiet diplomacy, or his envoys, or whether it's the General Assembly, Peace Building Commission, other bodies, but very, very importantly, the regional bodies. We realize that very often it's regional, sub-regional efforts, it's neighbors helping neighbors, that makes the most difference in the end. So we don't put all of our eggs in the Security Council basket, and people who think of responsibility to protect just about military response, forgetting the very, very important prevention parts, people who think of it as only something for the Security Council, again, are thinking of this, I believe, in just too narrow a way. So our responsibility to protect does not begin and end in the Security Council.